What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to Financial Footprints Podcast. My name is Kolin Hayes. I am your host, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about a rule of thumb. A rule of thumb that is great for people that are maybe new to managing their finances, maybe new to money, or are struggling with managing their finances and need a rule of thumb to follow. When I go through this rule of thumb, the 50-30-20 rule, this can be changed to fit your circumstances. The reason I say rule of thumb, because it can be changed. It's not like, hey, you have to do it this way or else you will fail. There are people that do it other ways, but I think for a starting point, this is a great place to begin. So the 50-30-20 rule. The 50-30-20 rule says this. If you take your net income, this is income after taxes. This is after the tax man, Uncle Sam, takes your money, whatever your tax bill is, maybe it's withheld from your W-2 paycheck. After those taxes, how much money is left over? How much money hits your bank account? This is your net income. Income after taxes. So the 50-30-20 rule says 50% of this dollar value of your net income should go towards your essential expenses. 30% of this net income, of this money, should go towards your discretionary expenses. And then 20% of your net income, of your money after taxes, should go towards your financial goals, whether that's saving, debt payoff, or investing, or a combination of the three. So the 50-30-20 rule is a great rule of thumb to start with. So let's talk about this a little bit more. The 50%, what falls into the essential expenses category? This is things like your rent, your mortgage, things like insurance on your car, things like groceries, food, things like your internet bill, your water bill, your electric bill, expenses that you need to survive every single month. These are things where you say, I can't live without this. This is a need. It is expenses that must be paid no matter what. That is what the 50% is. The 30% of this is your discretionary expenses. This is what I like to call the fun money, the extra money, the on top of my essentials money. This is things like shopping. This is things like dining out. This is things like going to a sporting event, a concert, whatever it is. This is extra money that you spend on top of your essentials. This is your wants, your subscriptions. These are money for your hobbies. This is vacation money. These are things that you want. You don't necessarily need them, but you want them. What's life without living and enjoying life in the present? So this rule of thumb says 30% of your money can be set aside to go towards your wants. Things that you enjoy, you don't need it, you enjoy it, so you spend money on them. But if things were to hit the fan, you were to lose your job, you could pull back from this. Maybe you don't go out to eat as much. Maybe you don't go on a vacation if you don't have a job, right? You still have your essential expenses you need to pay. That's why you have an emergency fund, but you don't need to go on vacation. It's a want, not a need. Maybe you cut back on some subscriptions that you're paying because it's a want, not a need. So the 30% of the 50-30-20 rule falls into your discretionary spending, your wants bucket. And that leaves the last 20% in your savings bucket, in your financial goals bucket, in your investing bucket, in your debt payoff bucket, or a combination of those three. So 20% of your money, based on this rule of thumb, says it should be going towards savings, emergency fund. It should go towards investing for my future through a retirement account, 401k, IRA, maybe a Roth IRA, whatever route you're going. Through my debt payoff, 20% of my money should be going towards that. So for example, if you make $6,000 a month net after taxes that hits your account, the 50-30-20 rule says that $3,000, 50% of that $6,000, should be used towards your needs, your essential spending. $1,800 or 30% of the $6,000 should be used towards your wants, and $1,200 or 20% of your income, your net income, should be dedicated to your financial goals, emergency fund savings, debt payoff, or investing. That is very simple, the 50-30-20 rule. Now, like I said at the beginning of this episode, this is just a rule of thumb. This is not, hey, you have to do the 50-30-20 and that's the only way to be successful with your money. Maybe you have different financial goals. Maybe 50% of your income, you're a high income earner, 50%, you don't need that on your essentials. So maybe you can move some of that 50% towards your 20% or towards your 30%. Or maybe you're someone that, hey, my hobbies, they don't really cost a lot. So I can move some of my 30% piece into my 20% and save and invest more. Or maybe I want to retire at 50 and I need mathematically to save more than 20%. Maybe I need to save 30% or 35%. Or maybe I've been a really diligent saver early on, and now I'm on coast fire. I don't really need to save 20% because my long-term goals and financially are in a really good spot. So I can back this down to 10% and maybe spend 40% on my wants, on my discretionary spending. So this is a very good rule of thumb to follow, especially for those that are starting out. And as your life changes, as your income changes, as your investment accounts change, as your discretionary expenses, as your hobbies change, as your family changes, you get married, you have children. As these things change, your percentages can fluctuate. But if you're just starting out and you're like, how do I do this? I have no idea. The 50-30-20 rule is a great place to start. But it's very simple. Take your net income after taxes, what hits your bank account, $6,000, $8,000, $20,000, $4,000, whatever it is. A good rule of thumb with the 50-30-20 rule. 50% essentials, 30% discretionary, and 20% financial goals. Maybe you've run this in your financial goals bucket is right now at 0%. You're doing zero saving, zero debt payoff, minus the minimum payments, and 0% saving. You're on 50% essentials and 50% discretionary. I challenge you. I'm not saying you have to get to 20% next month. I challenge you to get off of zero. I challenge you to increase that financial goals, that last bucket, that 20%, which maybe you're at 60% essentials, 40% discretionary. Well, I challenge you to get off 0%. Your financial goals bucket, the third bucket, the final bucket of the 50-30-20 rule buckets, that 20% should not be 0%, especially if you're just starting out. Anything helps. So I challenge you, maybe you've never done this before. A, look at your net income, how much money actually hits your bank account every single month, every single paycheck. Then how much of that goes towards my essentials? How much of that goes towards my spending? Go look at your credit card statements, your debit card statements, your bank account statement. How much of that money goes towards essentials and discretionary? And how much, if any, is going towards my financial goals? Once you understand that, then you can start building out a plan. How do I work towards maybe the 50-30-20 rule? Maybe I'm going to do some sort of variation of it, but at least working towards increasing, especially if you're at zero, my financial goals bucket. Savings, debt payoff, and investing. Thank you all for listening to the Financial Footprints podcast. My name is Kolin, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.